In a recent video, we talked about the Nagai, an extra-galactic species of sentient near-humans who invaded the galaxy and wreaked havoc before the Yuuzhan Vong made it cool. But as we discussed in that video, it wasn't just the Nagai who sent their ships into the galaxy hoping to leech resources from the Alliance. They were, in fact, unwittingly following in the footsteps of another race of near-humans known as the Tofs. Who had waged a war of conquest in their corner of the universe and then decided to go for more. In today's video, we'll be looking at the other side of the coin, who the Tofs were, what their culture and society were like, and why exactly they became invaders on such a scale. With no further ado, let's get into it.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Once again, our story takes us to Firefist. This was a dwarf satellite galaxy that was gravitationally bound to the main galactic disk and orbited the galaxy off the edge of the unknown regions. This is the galaxy the Nagai called home, and it's also where the species we'll be talking about today were from. The Tofs were native to the planet Tof, an ocean world whose vast waters were filled with Leviathan-class predators. But the Tofs had made the most of its meager land masses, building spaceports on the tiny island chains and making for the stars as quickly as they could. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Unlike what you'd expect from a species native to an ocean world, the Tofs didn't seem to be amphibious the same way, for example, the Nautilans were. They were quite large, standing around 2.5 meters tall and many times the size of a human. Their physiques were usually very rounded and flabby, with a sickly green complexion that might have once helped them blend in with the waters of their world. Interestingly enough, they usually gravitated toward one of two extremes, either exceedingly buff or exceedingly obese. Even the latter were strong enough to flatten an enemy like a pancake with a single slap of their huge hands though. And boy, did they slap people a lot. To put it nicely, Tofs weren't the most compassionate sort. If anything, they were immoral brutes with a little appetite for anything other than the 3 Fs: feasting, fighting, and fornicating. Speaking of the latter, Tof males had insatiable appetites, only made worse by their patriarchal society. Their culture was male-dominated, with female Tofs delegated to the kitchen and nothing more. They rarely left their home, much less the planet, and were usually visited by their husbands whenever their ship made dock. Meanwhile, the males went off into the galaxy and aggressively pursued relations with other humanoid women. More often than not, these advances were as recklessly persistent as much as they were unwanted, but the Tofs didn't care. It's said they were vulnerable to female flattery, but we wouldn't say that makes the harassment any better. Contrary to what most advanced societies strive for, the Tofs didn't care about things like efficiency or functionality. Instead, they embraced pompous flair, happily perpetuating things like elaborate rituals. Various groups in Tof society put tremendous effort into looking the way society expected them to look, only exaggerated to comedic effect. Their royals, for example, dressed like a British noble out of Pirates of the Caribbean, with powdered white wigs and flashy long coats. Soldiers carried decorative swords, like cutlasses, and made sure any of their battle scars or military medals were visible. Tof clothing also evolved with their rank. The lower ranked one was, the simpler the clothing. Thus, you could see a new Tof military recruit dressed in linen shirts, while their commander was adorned with jewelry on every finger, satin waist sashes, and even top hats or ornate gilded canes. And if that caricature wasn't enough for you, you'll be delighted to know that Tofs didn't really shower. Naturally, that meant they reeked, but they got around that by dousing themselves in copious amounts of perfume to combat the stench. This might all sound absolutely awful to us, but to the Tofs, it was the best culture they could have ever asked for. They demonstrated this routinely by refusing to learn about the other cultures they invaded, instead looking down on them and destroying countless monuments or artifacts over their years of conquest. It wasn't uncommon for a Tof invasion force to rip down a native landmark and erect a gaudy statue dedicated to themselves and their own culture. Common Tof themes that were often represented were dryads and water nymphs, creatures we can only presume the Tof considered similar to their own grace and beauty. All of this may sound quaint, like something out of a traditional fairy tale, but the Tof were not fairy tale creatures. In fact, they were the villains of the story. Their reign of villainy started in the early days of their society, back when they mostly focused on terrorizing one another. You'll recall that Tof, Their homeworld was an ocean world with islands scattered across its waters where the Tofs had built their civilization. Not much is known about these early centuries of Tof society. We do know that, early on, they established themselves as pirates and sailed across the seas to loot, pillage, and plunder each other, engaging in sea battles, and generally enjoying the life of piracy. They considered this period their golden age, which says a lot about them, but unfortunately for the rest of the galaxy, it had to come to an end. When their technological advancements rendered this life of seafaring piracy obsolete, they had to look outwards. Unable to easily loot and plunder each other, the Tofs turned to the stars, and once they'd developed interstellar travel, they took to the stars with gusto, eager to begin their life of piracy anew. As they emerged into the Sea of Stars, as they called it, they adopted the anachronistic style of fashion we talked about earlier and began making contact with other civilizations in the Fire Fist galaxy. This new outlet for their greed reignited their society's passions. One by one, they began encountering other civilizations in their galaxy, and one by one, they would invade, conquer, and exploit them. The Farun, a race of skilled shipwrights, were the first to fall. After came the Makabri, who were equipped with cybernetics to enhance their fighting capabilities. Then came the Nagai, whom we talked about in our last video. The Nagai were the first species to really give the Tofs a run for their money. Although the Tofs had superior firepower and numbers, the Nagai fought fiercely, engaging them in guerrilla warfare. Despite centuries of back and forth fighting, the Tofs were eventually able to subjugate the Nagai, officially adding their planet to their list of vassals. In revenge for the long battle, they desecrated the Nagai's world, destroying monuments, erecting statues of themselves to rub their victory in, plundering their resources, then moving on as if nothing had ever happened. By this point, they'd created an empire for themselves that they referred to as the Tof Kingdom. It included Tof and all their conquered worlds, and its day-to-day running was left to various patriarchs with extensive military experience. The people they'd conquered, however, didn't take kindly to being part of this empire. The Nagai brought the Farun and Makabri together, organizing a resistance movement to liberate their worlds from Tof occupation. Looking for resources to boost their war effort, the Nagai led an invasion of the main galactic disk, which they knew as Sky River. This led the Nagai into clashing with the New Republic, but an unexpected consequence was that the Tofs followed them from Fire Fist. The galaxy now had to deal with 2 extra-galactic invasion forces, and though the Nagai had engaged the Alliance on multiple worlds, the Tofs weren't slacking, having attacked and plundered multiple worlds. They saw it as an opportunity to take out Nagai resistance and gather new resources for their empire. In the end, when the Nagai realized the Tofs had also launched an invasion of Sky River, they allied with the Alliance and were able to defeat them. Following their loss, the Tofs lost control of their vassal worlds and were forced into retreat, returning to their homeworld where they would remain, building up their defenses now that new players had entered Fire Fist. In the end, the Tofs learnt the hard way that spreading your forces too thin and making too many enemies was the ultimate threat to any empire. They never again made a bid for conquest, remaining isolated on their homeworld in fear of a potential Mandalorian invasion. But what do you think? Which was more of a threat to the galaxy, the Nagai or the Tofs? Are there any other obscure Star Wars stories you'd like us to talk about? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.